We have some breaking news. The Toronto Blue Jays have made multiple surprising moves ahead of opening day. The day is finally here, and one specific move they made was very surprising. We're going to break that down as well as discuss some huge Jays updates as their official lineup for opening day in 2025 has come out. And they did something that not a lot of fans expected. We're going to break all that down ahead of what's going to be a fantastic year, ladies and gentlemen. But before we get into it, if you're enjoying the Daily Jays content, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We're going to have you covered all the way through all season long. Again, bear with the setup. I'm going to be at opening day today. Very exciting. And we finally made it. A long off season, a long past year coming off a horrible Jays season, the worst in a very long time. And it's time to flip the script today. And it all starts with the game against the Orioles today. So if you're at the Rogers Center, enjoy the game. If you're watching from home, enjoy the game as well. We're going to keep you up to date all season long. This is the place to be. And let's dive right into some of the moves they made this morning. Minutes ago, the Blue Jays announced the opening day roster. So we'll dive into the opening day lineup in a minute here. But the big piece of news here is that you can see the bottom three. Tommy Nance was DFA'd. Nick Robertson was DFA'd. But Zach Pop has officially been DFA'd. He's been designated for assignment, which means he is gone. He is no longer a part of this Blue Jays team. This comes in a bit of a surprise. We were all wondering what their plan was going to be because we knew they had to make a spot for Jacob Burns on the 40-man, or on the 26-man active roster, In order to do that, they had to get rid of some guys. And Zach Pop was one of the players who fell a victim to just not having enough, not having enough roster spots. And that's obviously because Zach Pop was injured. If Zach Pop was not injured, he probably would have been in Jacob Burns' place. But ladies and gentlemen, it is unfortunate. And you can see this here. Out for Zach Pop, man. Dude is already hurting and now heads to waivers. Should help his chances of making it through, though. Now, there is a good sign to this is that there is a chance because he's hurt that he clears waivers and makes it back within the Jays organization. Some people, are a fan of Zach Pop, some aren't, but regardless, this is a very surprising move because Zach Pop was someone that was definitely penciled into the bullpen even this season because of the injuries to Eric Swanson and things like that prior to his injury. You look at his stats, he's coming off a very poor year, really a poor couple of seasons, and the stats, of course, aren't very good, but there was some praise earlier on in spring training for Zach Pop about how electric his stuff was, all these different things. And ultimately cultivated in him getting DFA'd this morning, so he is no longer going to be a part of this team. Of course, he's injured, and they had to make room for a bunch of different players. And then, as a result, he is gone because Jacob Burns, of course, takes his spot. And, of course, we also know Alan Roden, Miles Straw, all those guys were selected. So a bit of an interesting move there. Of course, Nick Robertson is also gone, and Tommy Nance as well, who he knew wasn't going to break the team after Richard Lovelady got selected. But a bit of an unfortunate one, ladies and gentlemen. But at the end of the day, it makes some sense. Some other news here. Eric Swanson placed in the 15-day IL. Dalton Varsho placed in the 10-day IL, retroactive to the 24th, so he could be coming back sooner than expected. Also, Ryan Burr, who's still in the mix, is on the 15-day IL. And, of course, Straw, Roden, and Jacob Burns set the stage tonight for what's going to be a great game. And let's dive right into tonight's game. Shout out to the Blue Jays here. The graphic is fantastic. Probably their best one in a very long time. But ladies and gentlemen, we have it. 3 p.m. Eastern against the Orioles. José Berríos takes the bump. Now, there is some very interesting moves here because Bichette is leading off. Then we have Vladdy Santander. Kind of makes sense. You then have Andres Jimenez in the cleanup spot for, I think, he only has 15. He has only hit cleanup 15 times in his career, or maybe which is crazy. And then Alejandro Kirk following him, which we all expected. Andres Jimenez has probably the best base running and base stealing ability on the team, so you want him ahead of Alejandro Kirk. And then you have Springer down there in the 6 hole with Wagner, Clement, and Roden. So they decided to field both Will Wagner and Alan Roden. As a result, they put George Springer as your opening day center fielder in 2025, which this is very surprising to me because not only did they go all in with the offense, and they are completely changing the turn here. This outfield, I'm very curious to see how it does because you do not have a lot of ground here in the outfield a lot of ground being covered. Anthony Santander doesn't have a ton of range. George Springer, not a ton of range. Alan Roden, yet to be seen. He's probably going to be an average to below average defender, depending on how it goes in right field. But they did something that not a lot of us thought. We thought they would pick Nathan Lucas or Miles Straw. We thought Nathan Lucas was going to get the start in center field today simply because Dalton Varsho is out. Now, if you add Dalton Varsho to this lineup, I already think this lineup looks really, really good. I'm curious to see what you all think about it. Maybe change the order up a little bit. We'll dive into that in a minute. But if you have Varsho in center field, Springer right, Santander and left with one of Wagner or Roden at DH, or even taking one of these guys out could be interesting. Even with Santander at DH, Roden in right, Springer in left, Varsho in center. That really helps complement the defensive side of the ball because they're going to be a bit rough defensively in the outfield today, which is why they probably did it with José Berríos, who's primarily a ground ball pitcher. But they also have Andrés Giménez in the cleanup spot, which is very interesting because he doesn't hit for a lot of power. He hasn't really been a very good hitter in his career over the past couple seasons especially. So having him there shows, I think, A, their trust in him, but also B, their lack of trust in George Springer, who's in the 6 hole now. And it's going to be very interesting to see how long that sticks. Maybe we see some, Alan Roden or Will Wagner spots at the leadoff, and then you have Bichette moving down to the cleanup spot. I think that's a realistic possibility going forward. But for opening day today, this is the lineup they are running with here. And it's a little bit interesting as Alan Roden makes his debut in right field. All eyes are going to be, not everybody, but Alan Roden in specific, especially ahead of the Jays failing to come to an agreement with Vladdy. It's going to be interesting. But for now, I'm not going to worry about the Vladdy extension for at least today's game because I'm just going to enjoy the moment. Obviously, the Jays are finally, this lineup looks a lot better than it once did. And they have 2 guys now, Will Wagner and Alan Roden, who are a little bit of wild cards. If you can get one of these guys to put up a 3 WAR, this team instantly becomes a playoff contender and maybe the favorite in the AL East. And you can see this here. We understand what's at stake this year and every year. John Schneider speaks in the pressure for the Jays to be a contender this season. This is the most, I think, both hype and just energy around the team that there's been in the Vladimir Guerrero Jr. era for opening day. And that's because everybody knows that it all comes down to this. You have 2 pending free agents with Vladdy and Bo. You have, some other ones as well in the pitching staff. And most importantly, you have some other external factors factoring into this, whether that be the front office, whether that be all these other things. And now they're at a point where they need to win as many games as possible. And we know how much wins matter. We saw it in 2021 when they missed the playoffs by 1 game. You need to win as many games as possible. And this one for momentum against a Baltimore Orioles team that is still very good, but they don't have their best player in Gunnar Henderson. Yes, they have Adley Rutschman, they have Ryan O'Hearn, they have Ryan Mountcastle who crushes the Blue Jays. This is a huge game for the Jays and something to keep in mind as you start to look at the outfield here. You see here from Thomas Hall, good thing José Berríos is a ground ball pitcher with that outfield configuration, and the Jays are certainly easing Alan Roden in, batting him in the Kevin Kiermaier second leadoff spot. So yeah, Alan Roden's hitting 9, which is interesting because I think he ultimately, when everything is said and done, is going to be hitting higher in the lineup than that. But for his first, go here, I absolutely love it. I like the lineup. I don't love Giménez in the cleanup spot, but maybe they're seeing something behind the scenes. We're obviously not privy to seeing that every single day, and I have a feeling that that's what's happening here. But a bunch of different moves, some unexpected ones. I really didn't think that they were going to be rocking Andrés Giménez in the cleanup spot, but I also didn't think they're going to be rocking George Springer in center field in 2025 just because they didn't really hint to that, and especially taking Miles Straw and Nathan Lucas. I could see a world where, depending on the matchup, if a left-hander comes in, they might pinch hit Miles Straw for Alan Roden, unless Roden's having a great game, and then he factors into center field. You move George Springer back to right. Maybe, you move Anthony Santander around. It's going to be interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, it is going to be a long, long season of hopefully fun and super, super exciting. And that'll wrap it up. Also, one quick shout out to viewer Chris O'Fray. He is now he's going to his 20th straight opening day. So shout out to Chris over there. And thank you for the support on the channel. Ladies and gentlemen, that'll wrap it up. Thank you guys for watching.